Yes, so, I explained that HTML is basically what defines, the structure of any websites that you see, right? No matter how complex any website, web application, whatever it is, no matter how complicated it is still made up of, you know, a bunch of familiar components. There's always colors, there's always buttons, there's always texts, images, forms. So forms like inputs, drop downs, radio buttons. Yeah, and HTML is essentially how you define, all those elements that you see on any page. If you open an application and they say, oh, click here to create an account now, you click that link, it takes you to a sign up page. That link is HTML. You get to the sign up page, you see an input for you to enter your first name, last name, email, and password and create an account. All those inputs are HTML. The button that you click on to create an account, that's HTML. So that's essentially why it's called, a markup language, right? Hypertext markup language. So, is how you kind of like define, your markup. Now, when you're done, defining the skeleton and the structure of what your page should look like, CSS is essentially how you now apply styling to it. That's how you decide, this thing should have a color of red, and this one should have, a color of blue, right? So today what we're going to try and do is this simple, portfolio page, basically, that we have here. So this is an open source project that I found online. So we'll just, essentially try and do the same thing with HTML and CSS. All right, so let's start. Right, so like I mentioned, HTML is essentially how you define. Sorry, let me see if I can put these two things side by side. So that's, yeah, so HTML, like I mentioned, is like, how you define the structure of what your page should look like. So just give me a second. All right. So yeah, HTML is how you define what the structure of your page should look like. So, looking at this page, for example, you have the logo here. You have some um, some links, that you can click on. You have this section, that introduces the owner of this website. Have the about section, the experience section, the person showcases some of their projects, and you have the contact me section. All right, so, let's just start with, this header. So the part that has the logo and the links. So please feel free to ask, just interrupt me and ask your questions at any point. So, this, what you see on the screen is basically the structure for every HTML file, right? So this is always consistent, minus this aspect. So at the top, you always have this doc type. So what does doc type mean? It just basically means, that this document is an HTML document, right? And it's technically optional, but it's always just nice to have it there so that the browser understands that this is an HTML file. So after specifying your doc type, you usually now have the HTML tag, right? And in HTML, so ignore all of this. In HTML, a tag starts with a less than sign, the tag name and a greater than sign. So this is called an opening tag. All right, so this is called an opening tag and this is called a closing tag. So what's the difference between the opening tag and the closing tag? It's just essentially the forward slash that you have at the beginning of the tag name. That's basically it. So going back to, what we had before, you can see we have the head. So we have the HTML and look at the closing HTML. The only difference is the forward slash. Look at the opening head, look at the closing head. The only difference is the forward slash. Same thing for the body, right? Now, tags can also take something called an attribute. All right, so basically just pass extra information about, that particular tag. So different tags have different attributes. And as we cover, different elements or tags, you would see, some of the attributes that they have. So for example, look at the HTML tag, it takes an attribute of language, which is also optional. All attributes are optional. You don't have to specify them. But the HTML tag, can take an attribute of language. And in this case, the value is English. So if you were to, if the language for this site were to be French, for example, this would probably be something like FR, right? And you actually don't need to like memorize all of this. You can always look it up whenever, you feel like you need to. So if you look at all the tabs I have open, for example, look at this, what is a virtual color in CSS, right? Like even after 6 years or 5+ years now of, doing this thing, there are still things that I don't remember, right? And I just open Google and I look it up, right? Or you could even forget something as simple as, how do I apply background color? It doesn't matter. You can always, even in an interview, right? This is something I do in an interview quite often. When I'm interviewing and I cannot remember, what I'm trying to do, right? I open, and maybe I'm sharing my screen. I open Google in the middle of the interview. I look it up and I continue, with the assessment. So, programming is a little bit, different from what the norm is in other career paths because there's so many things involved, right? You're not really expected to, know all of all these things offhand. What's important is that you have a proper understanding of, what each thing is doing, right? So, yeah, then, so usually your HTML file would start with doctype and the opening HTML tag and the closing HTML tag, and everything else is going to be between the HTML tags, right? Every time, that one never changes. Then usually you have your head tag, right? And, you can ignore all the meta stuff for now. The main thing that's, is kind of like important for you at this stage, about the head tag is the head tag is essentially where you put your title. And what's your title? Who's drawing annotations on my screen? And what's title? So let me save this and open in the browser. So look at this. It says documents, right? On the browser sidebar, it says documents. If I change this to Hello World, the title here changes to Hello World. So title is basically, what the title of the page is. In Chrome, this part is usually at the top. So that's essentially what title is. So in this, case, based on what we're trying to do today, we can call this, my portfolio. right, so you can see, my portfolio is the title. Now, after the head, you have the body, and the body is essentially where the contents of the page would go. So right now, because there's nothing inside the body, you can see the page is blank. The moment I type anything here and I save, it shows up on the screen, because what you see on the screen is usually what is within the body. Make sense so far for the beginners, or are we overwhelmed already? All right, I would assume that silence means everyone is all right. So yeah, going back to, yeah, this is what we're trying to replicate. So going back to this, all right, so I said, essentially the first thing on the page here is the heading section that has the logo and all the links. And how do you specify, a header section in HTML? You just use the opening header tag and the closing header tag. And here, we can add our text or John Doe. Now, speaking of texts, right, there are three major ways, to add texts to HTML. And that depends on the type of text you're adding. So the type of text that you can have includes headings and titles, paragraphs, and spans, right? Now, last week I explained this, using simple, using Google Docs, right? So this is actually no different than, what you'd experience in a Word document, right? So in a Word document, you essentially have headings. Then you can have paragraph, which is essentially a normal text. I mean, there's no span, but I'll talk about span. So that's just it. Headings are for titles, paragraphs are for, normal body of text. And how do you specify headings in HTML? You use the H tag and the size, right? So you have H1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So these are all the heading tags, that are available to you in HTML, and you can see them on the screen. Ironically, right, H1 is the largest and H6 is the smallest. Don't ask me why. I don't know. That's just how it is. And then have paragraphs. And for paragraphs, that's just a P. Right. So you can see all the titles, regardless of their size, they're always bold, to show that, oh, this is a heading. And then you have paragraphs. Right. And like I mentioned, you also have span, which is also like a paragraph, but I'll show you the difference later. Oh no, let me just talk about it now. The difference is if you have two spans side by side, you can see they show up side by side. But if I do two paragraphs, you can see they show up on separate lines. So just like in regular English language, a paragraph would always start on a new line because it's a block level element, and spans are inline elements that can stay beside each other. All right, so this is essentially typography in HTML. There's nothing else you need to know about typography. When it comes to adding text to a page, it's either heading, paragraph, or span. All right, so going back to this, right? So we'll use, an H1 for our logo, and then we have our links. So how do you specify links in HTML? You have the anchor tag, right? So again, this is, if you are completely new to this is going to be like a lot of new information. So don't be overwhelmed. Don't even try to take notes, to be honest, right? Programming is not it's not the type of class you come with, a jotter and a pen. Just make sure that everything I'm saying, makes sense. And if there's any single thing that doesn't make sense to you, just ask for clarification, right? Don't try to cram everything I'm saying. Don't try to write anything down. As long as you understand that, I want to add a link to a page, there's an element to it. If you don't even remember what the element is, you can always look it up and you'll see that, it's an anchor tag. So instead of trying to, write notes or jot somewhere, just, um, pay attention, right? So, sorry, give me a minute. Yeah, so just pay attention to everything I'm saying. So the first link we have here is about. Second one is experience. Third one is projects, and last one is contacts. Yeah, so let's check what we're working on. So yeah, you can see we have all our links on the page, right? And how do you tell HTML where this link should go, right? Remember when I said elements or tags can take extra information, and how do they take those extra information? They take them using attributes, and the attributes to specify where a link should take you to is called the href attributes. All right, so here you basically just put where it's go. And now you can see immediately I added the attributes, the styling of the appearance of the about changed, right, compared to all the others. So now if I click on this about link, it takes me to google.com. All right, and I can press my back arrow to go back. So does this make sense? And if you don't want your link to go anywhere, right, you can always just do hash. So let's say you're just testing for now, they've not told you, the owner of the project hasn't told you where all these links should go to, but you need to, specify it. So you can just do hash. All right. So now we have our links, right? So, what's next? This section with the image and all these contents. Now, there's an element called a div, right? And a div is essentially like a box to help you to group stuff together. So why are we grouping these links together? That's because if you look at the page, they are actually meant, to be together. So these are all the navigation links that we have on this website. So it only makes sense that, we wrap them in an element. But that doesn't change how they look, right? Until we get to CSS and apply some styling, it would look the same way. So let's move on to the next section. So this is our heading section. So and leave comments, say heading. So let's call this section the hero section. because that's usually what people put it. And how do you specify a section in HTML, right? You have a section tag. Like I said, this would not make any visual difference to the page, right? This is just how you specify that, okay, this is one section, this is another section of my page, and this is another section of my page in HTML. Now, what's the first thing on this page, on this section? You have the image, right? And how do you add images in HTML? You have the img tag, right? Now, you add an image, we go to our page, right? Nothing shows up. Why? Because we did not tell HTML what the image is. You're essentially just saying, oh, this is add an image, but what image? It's like when you tell Spotify play a song, but Spotify, like what song are you trying to play? You have to specify what you're trying to play. So how do you do that? Image has an attribute called source, and inside source, you just pass the link to the image. So let me just copy this image URL from this sample portfolio and paste it here. So you can see it's just a link to a PNG file. So now if we go back to our page, you can see our image is showing up, even though it's very large, right? CSS is how I would style it. But now we have our image on the screen. So what's next here? We have some texts, right? 3 different texts. So I'm going to group them together. Everything on this side, I'll group them together because they are meant to be together. So let's start with H5. Oh, hello. H1, H1 H4 for front-end developer. So how did I decide which one is H1, 2, 3? Right. The truth is, it's mostly just vibes. Right. Not going to lie to you. The only one that is usually consistent is H1. So H1 is usually this. I don't need to. So like I said, it's mostly just vibes. H1 is usually like the main, like whenever you're looking at a section and there's a main text there, right? That's usually like the H1, and the rest can be anything from 2 to 6. Usually doesn't matter. Now you have, after the text, you have 2 buttons here, or links actually. Download CV and contact info, right? So I'm going to group them together again, because as you can see, there are 2 links that are together. So this also shows you that you can have elements inside of elements inside of elements. So you can nest them as much as you need to. So I'd have one tag here, put hash for now, and this would be download CV, and this would be contact info. So let's look at our page. All right, so you see, we have our header, we have our image, and we have all of this. Granted, it's not yet looking like the sample, right? So again, HTML has nothing to do with appearance. It's just how you define skeletal structure of what a page should look like. A page should have text, you add it. A page should have buttons, you do that with HTML. But where they should be, how they should be positioned, what the size should be, what the color should be, all of that is CSS. So I think before we move on to like the next section, right, we should try to, style the ones we've done so far. So these 2 sections. try to style them. So how do we add CSS to our page? You know, can that multiple ways. You can either have a style tag inside your head that takes all your styles. And I talked about how you target elements on your page uh last week, right? So how do you target an element? There are also multiple ways to do that, because I cannot just say background color, red, without telling CSS what exactly I want to apply the background color to. So you have to first start by telling it what to select, right? So the easiest way to target an element is to just use the name of that element. All right, and then if I now say background color here of red, you can see, the entire page is red now because the body is basically the entire page. Yeah, but that's not what we want to do. So what I want to do is first of all target this header, and we want to say display of flex. Now, what does display flex mean? Display flex means puts all the children of what you are targeting, put them side by side. That's it. Just put them side by side. So right now, look at inside this header, right, which is this part here. We have the H1 saying John Doe, and we have all the links, which is wrapped in this div under it. Once I save this, they will go side by side. Why? Because the moment you add display flex to any element, all the immediate children of that element, would show up side by side. So as you can see, right, they are now side by side. Before, you had the links under, immediately added a display flex. You now have them side by side. But let me give this header a background color so we can see what the header is, right? So this is the header. So the header is basically the full width of the page. How do I, say the H1 should be on the extreme left and the links should be on the extreme right? Using Flexbox, right, and CSS, you can do that by specifying something called justify contents. And you have a bunch of options. So let's start with center. So we'll see what center does. So you can see it's now in the middle. Can do flex stats, which is the default. It's now in the stats. Can do flex end. And you can see it's now in the end. But what we actually want is space between. So you can see space between basically just means put the space between the elements. So if I had three things here, if I had three children, H1, H1, and T, space between would just basically put the space between the elements. If we go back to flex stats, right, you can see it's all in the beginning again. Flex end, it's at the end. Space between would space them out. So space between is basically the horizontal position, right? But what about the vertical position? Because as you can see, you have, these links at the top while you have, the John Doe in the center. So basically same way you have the justify content to move them around horizontally. You have align items to move them around vertically. So up to down. Justify content is left to right. Align items is top to bottom. So if I do center, so you can see both the John Doe texts and the links are now in the center of the header. And I can remove my Bible. So same thing for the image and the text at the bottom. If we want to put them side by side, what exactly would we do? We would, so this section, right, can select section and just do the same thing, display flex. So you can see they're now side by side, but it's going out of the screen because the image is too big. So let's select the image. And by the way, there's a problem with what we're doing, but we'll get to that shortly. So let's select our image and let's say the width to adjust the width. So let's say the width should be 300 pixels. So now you can see our image is smaller and we have this side by side. So it's only side by side because I gave this section that has the image and the block of text, the display flex. If I remove the display flex, you can see it's now at the bottom. So don't forget, essentially you have an element that has multiple children inside it. If you give it display flex, all of those children would go side by side. Now, how do I bring it to the center of the page? Same way we did before. Specify contents, but this time, guess what the value would be? Center. If we do space between like we did on the header, you have them apart, right? But if we do center, you have them center. And I can do the same thing I did here. Align items, put them in the middle of themselves. Any questions so far?
Robson, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, please, can you just run through the CSS again? Like, just help me run through it. Not like a full detailed explanation, but just run through.
When did you join?
I joined so many people.
So you mixed the explanation. The class is being recorded. All right, so you can go back.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go back and watch the videos.
Thank you.
Because, yeah. So yeah.
Hello?
We have this.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, what's your question?
Hello? Please, can you like differentiate really the difference between that justify content and align items? Like what
So
exactly is the
what
difference
I
between
said
both of them?
is justify content is how you move the elements on the horizontal axis. So by horizontal, I mean left to right. Align items is how you move them on the vertical axis, which is top to bottom.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. So again, like don't try to cram these things. How it will stick in your head is repeated exposure, right? When you're repeatedly exposed to the same thing over and over and over and over and over, that's the only way to stick. If you try to cram it, you'll forget tomorrow, right? So by the time you've built 10 websites, and in those 10 websites, you've battled with justify content and align items. At the end of that, you'd be sure, which one is which one. All right. So, but you can see, when you have display flex, right? Now I have justify content center, so that's why they're in the center of the page. But we need some space between the image and this div. All right, so this div here. Now, let's talk about an issue with what we are doing currently. We have one div here that is wrapping all our links, and we have a second div here that is wrapping this text. if in our CSS, we just do, and we say background red, you can see all the divs on the page automatically take a background color. So how do we specify that this is the specific div that we want? We can give them a class. All right. So class attributes is how you give a specific element a name that you can target using CSS. So let's call this user info, just because that's essentially what this is. So just applying a class, you can say would not do anything. You have to let CSS know that I want to target that class. And you do that using dots and the class name. So user info. So if I save it now, you see this is the only div that is carrying a background color of red. This one is no longer carrying it. And actually, you don't even need to specify that it's a div. Once you select the particular class, CSS will go and look for just the elements that have that class name, apply the styles. So you can see it still works. But if you want to be explicit, yeah. So how do I put some styling between this div and the image? I have something called column gap, right? And I can do column gap of 20 pixels. So now you see we have some space. If I change this to 200, see the space is wider. So let's just look at our sample one more time. All right, so let's make this 40. So we have 40. So usually I like adding background color to things when I'm working on them, so that it just helps me visualize what is there. Because if I remove this now, the background color goes away. So I use it to debug, to guide myself on, okay, this is where this thing is right now. So can I just leave it for now? Right. Now, if you look at the fonts, right, you notice that the font is, slightly different from ours. So in general typography, there are two groups of font families. There is serif and sans serif. So serif is usually these ones that always have like, curves on the edges, and sans serif is the opposite. So let's change the fonts of our web page. So I'm going to select the HTML, or let's select the body, since that's like, the elements wrapping our entire page. And how do I change the fonts? So I'm just going to say fonts family, sans serif. Right, I can see. And you can basically use any of the fonts that you have in your browser by default. All right, so you can specify multiple fonts and separate them by comma. So basically what will happen is, if the browser doesn't see this one, it'll go to this one, go to this one, go to this one. And if it doesn't see any of them, it will just do a fallback to sans serif. So yeah, then let's talk about our links. So I can remove the background color here. So let's talk about our links. So we have download CV and contact info. So this is what our links will look like. So one has a background color of white, and that one has a background color of kind of like black. So what do we do? So like I said, how do you target specific elements? We give them a class name. So we'll call this one download CB. Now we'll call this one contacts. So we'll call this on download CV link and we'll call this contact info link. So now that we have their class names, we can select them. So let's start with the download. So let's start with the download CV link. All right, so let's give it a background color of red just to test that it's working. So yeah, it is. So anyway, we want it to have a background color of white, which technically would make no difference because the page is already white. But if you look at, essentially what we're trying to do, the background color is white, but it has a black border around this. So how do you give things border, right? So that introduces us to our next CSS property, which is border. So for border, you specify the width of the border, the style of the border, and the color of the border. So you can see now we have a border. So by default, the style is always solid, but then you have dashed, right? So you can see, I zoom in for everyone, dashed is this solid, it's just a straight line. Makes sense. Now let's talk about spacing, right? So we have our border now, but going back to what we're trying to do, our reference, there's some space between the border and what's it called? And the actual, text that we have inside the link. So there's actually no single way, right, to do things in CSS. So with CSS, there's actually multiple approaches. It's about just finding which one is best, So let me show you what I mean. We can either start by setting a display of inline block. Don't worry, I'll come back to, we've seen display flex. We haven't seen display of inline block. I'll come back to what that is shortly. But we can do this, and then we can do, let's do a width of 200 pixels. So, okay, that's too much. Let's do 160 or 100. Okay, 100 seems fine. Then let's do a height of 30 pixels. All right, so you see. And actually, let's just even do display flex. So we can do justify content, center, align items, center. All right, so let's increase our width a bit to 120. So you can see now we have what's we have our link and we have spacing around it. Right, but what did you notice? You notice that the second link has gone to the bottom. That's because, remember when I explained the difference between a paragraph and a span? I said they are the same thing, but the only difference is a paragraph is a block level element that will take the full width of the screen that is available, while a span is an inline element that would appear side by side, right? It would only take the space in it as opposed to, the full width. That applies to basically all the elements that we have in HTML. Some elements are inline, some elements are block level. So give me a moment. All right. Yeah, so some elements are inline, some elements are block level. When you apply display flex to anything, it turns that element into a block level element. So, which is why the contact info has had to be pushed to the next line. So if I remove this, you can see the contact info is back on the side. But notice something else. The width and height also don't work anymore. That's because inline elements essentially would not take size and spacing styling. They would only just stick to what their content needs. And as you can, if you look at the border right now, you see that it's only just taking the space needed for the text inside. If we reduce the text, so let's change this to from download CV to down CV. It will shrink to just only take the space it needs, right? If I give it if I bring back the display flex, it turns it into a block level element. And it doesn't matter if the text takes all the space or not. It will essentially just take, whatever width and height you allocate to it. Now, what if we want to use flex, but we still want to keep this as an inline element, right? Because we want our contact info side by side. Again, there are multiple ways to do this, but we also have the option of just saying inline flex, which would allow you to do everything you're currently doing, but maintain this element as an inline element. So don't worry, right? I don't expect everyone to understand what's like make sense of what the CSS box model is, because everything I'm talking about right now is under a topic called the CSS box model. Right, so you see the diagram. So that's essentially what determines spacing around elements, what elements takes what size, padding, margin, width, height. Yeah. So I don't know if this is covered in the videos on Alt School, but if it's not, please reference it in the Udemy account. The moment you understand the box model, that's the secret to building whatever kind of layouts that any designer gives you. All right, so I can briefly show you like the Figma design for the project that I'm currently working on. This is not even it, but this can work as well. So let's say, can you guys still see my screen? Can you guys see my screen? All right, thanks, Cyprian. So I hope you can see Figma, right? But look at this page. So this is an admin dashboard, right? I have different sections on this page. You have the sidebar that has all these links. You have the header section. You have the main section. And in this main section, there are also different sections inside it. You have this top part that has the title, and you have a table at the bottom. And even within that table, there are different rows and different columns. All right. So how do you, specify, how do you basically design the structure of this layout? Oh, this is a sidebar. This is a header. This is, this is the main section that should then now house like the contents of the page, right? That's essentially where the box model comes in. Let me confirm where exactly it is covered in the Udemy course I provided. Okay, so I see people have already started watching this. Yep, so it's covered. Yeah, CSS box model, margins and patterns, adding dimensions, centering on the page. So my challenge for, those of you that haven't, so you've done HTML, you've started CSS, but you don't properly understand how Flex works, how styling works, how, no, not styling, how margins, patterns, borders, then inline and block level elements works. I recommend you come and watch 32 to 43. All right. By the time you get to this next section, it covers everything I'm saying about Flexbox and all of that. So yeah, coming back to this. All right. So now we have, our link with a border and subspace around it. Now, how do we make our borders have rounded corners? You do that by specifying a border radius. So I say 20px, and now you see it's rounded, right? So like I said, and I keep saying this over and over and over just so that it sticks in everyone's head. This is a bunch of new information, especially if you're a beginner. Don't try to, if you're out there, just watch what I'm doing and you're taking notes, writing border radius with your pen and paper. It's not going to work because that's just not how it works. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of CSS attributes. Main thing is, just focus on properly understanding the concepts. I want to add border radius. I want to make my borders rounded. I don't know how to do it. All I have to do is say, right, and you find it to create rounded corners effects in CSS, we use border radius. You try it out, it works. If it doesn't work, ask people on the group, ask more questions. And the trick is, so the idea is the first time you encounter a type of design, right? And this goes beyond CSS. It's not just CSS, it's basically anything. The first time you encounter a specific type of functionality, you might not know how to implement it yet because again, it's your first time, right? But when you figure out how to do it that one time, the next time you will know it because, so let's say the first time you see a rounded border in a Figma design and you're not sure how to go about it, and then you search and search and search, it could take you hours, it could take you days and figure it out that, oh, to make my borders rounded, I have to just do, what's it called? Border radius, right? Border radius is how I make my borders rounded, and then you do border radius and you're good. The next time you see a rounded border in a design, you will not even stress because you already know that border radius is how it works. So the more projects you build, the more things you figure out, the better you get. It's not by classes, right? Which brings me back to, people that were saying, oh, you thought the program was going to be, completely physical classes. They cannot learn by watching videos. It's only by attending classes. If you're still on that table, then you're not ready to become a software engineer, right? Because for every new project that you would get in your job as a software engineer, there's going to be something just different about it from all the things that you've done before. So it's from doing all those projects that you'll get better. Let me even show. Let me see if this project is still up. All right, it's up. So hold on, let me look for it. You can see over the years, I've done, quite a bunch of stuff. Some of this I haven't did them before this time, but I think this is it. So can you guys just see my screen? So I hope you guys can see my screen. This one, everybody's just quiet. Anyway,
Yes,
Yes,
I
yes,
can.
yes.
so this was a project from like 4 years ago. It's still running. It's still just there, right? It still works. You can still see the latest movies on it. And I just did this project back then. I think I was like 1 year or maybe, yeah, around maybe 1 year into my career at the time. And I was like, oh, I need something to, just master my CSS designs and learn how to consume APIs and do all that stuff. I didn't want to finish it, right? It was supposed to have a bunch more things, like being able to save the movies you want to watch for later and search and all that interesting stuff. I didn't finish it. But I did it, I deployed it, and it's still there till now. You go to it, it's fetching movies from IMDb. It's displaying it on the page, right? I can click on a movie to go to that movie's page and go back home. Can switch here to top rated movies. Can switch to popular right now. I saw The Big Keeper yesterday. Nice movie. I recommend. There's TV shows too, right? So just always build projects, right? Just always build projects. Always, always, always build projects. It's the only way you get better. Like when I started, I just essentially just build anything for fun that comes to my head. I'll just build it. Because the difference between tech and any other career is if you're trying to be a medical surgeon, you can't just go and be operating on people for fun, right? There are processes to follow, there are all of that. If you're an architect, if you're a construction engineer, you can't just erect properties for fun. But in tech, right, because it's all software, whatever idea, that comes to your head, right, just build it. Just build it. Like you can never tell what will come from it, you know. So, and it's from building all those projects that you'd eventually get better, right? Even right now, I'm still actively building stuff. So I have, you know, ImpulseHQ.io. This website has fancy animations. There's AI on it and a bunch of, interesting things. So you never stop building stuff. Like you actually never stop, building stuff. So it's the only way, a bunch of all this new information would stick in your head. And the reason why I keep trying to put all these encouragements out there is because I know that this thing is very difficult and can be overwhelming sometimes to understand. Right? It's like for people that are maybe just joining today now, first time, they're just sharing display flex, just file content, align items, and you're already just having headache because you're wondering how would all these things stay inside my head? Don't worry, it will stay as long as you just keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. So that's that. So let's just quickly finish styling our buttons, and I'll call it a day. Right, so we can give this color, just text color. Let's just call it black, and then uh, let's say text decoration. No, oh, decoration. So text decoration will remove the underline. So the reason why color of black didn't work is because by default, if you've clicked on a link before, the browser, so by default, if you haven't clicked on a link, browser will make it blue. When you've clicked on it, it will become purple, right? So you'll notice that sometimes when you do like a Google search for something, some of the pages that you've probably visited before. So let me see if I click this link now. I go back. Yeah, so you can see because I clicked on it, it's now purple, while the other one is blue. So that's essentially what's happening here. But there's a way to override it, but that's not for today's class. Then for the contact info link, we can just copy everything, duplicate it and change this to contact info link. Now there's a way we could have, because as you can see, a bunch of the things here are the same. There's a way to not have to repeat everything, but I don't want to confuse people for today. But our contact info link, background color should be black. Yeah, but you can see it's still purple because we clicked on it. So like I said, we'll still get to the point where we see how to override the styles. But yeah, but our header is a bit too close to the top. Sorry, our section is a bit too close to the header. So again, let's give this a background color so we can see what our section is covering. So how do we add some spacing? Right, so we could do padding top, let's say 200 pixels. So now we have some space at the top. 200 is a bit too much. And then we can do the same thing for the bottom. Padding bottom. So padding is basically how you add space inside of an element. If I wanted to add space outside of the elements, I'll do margin top. Let's say margin top. You can see that pushes it down, right? So padding was adding it inside of the red box. Margin is adding it outside of the red box. So those are, the things that the box model would explain better to you. So then I can remove this, and you can see our small page starting to come together. So, we can stop there and not blow people's head off, right? So for the beginners, I hope that, this serves as like a, nice intro to what HTML and CSS is. But to reiterate, right, these sessions, these weekly meetups, they are supposed to just be for us to go over what's it called? Questions and assignments and corrections and all of that. But we can't move to that point because every week, we have people, we've not made enough progress. So how can I give assignments to go and design the rest of the page now when we have 7 people on the call? And okay, that's even 7 including me. So technically we have 6 people on the call, and 4 of those 6 people, are still in what is HTML. Right, so these weekend sessions are actually not meant to be a class. They are meant to be answering all the things that was confusing about what everybody covered during the week. Right. And I understand here, like, people have issues, right? Or issues with their laptop, issues with whatever. But let's try to, get rid of any blocker and make time to progress, at least for those that are, fairly serious with moving forward in this career. So, and for those that, again, for those that have already started, right? So maybe you're already doing some stuff with HTML and CSS. You need extra guidance from me, like the pace of the program, the pace of the other guys are maybe dragging you back a bit. Send me a DM, right? Let's talk. I'll see what I can do in my very busy schedule. So that's about that. Any questions? And by the way, we also have 50 people in this cohort, and we've never had more than 9 or 10 people at most on this call. And people were lamenting about, physical meetup. Physical meetup happened yesterday now. Only 3 people showed up. So yes, I know that the design of the program is not perfect, but even we too, we can do better. Right? How are they supposed to be encouraged when, we're only seeing 4 5 people out of 50 showing up for both physical and virtual sessions? It makes it feel like a waste of time, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter for those that are serious. I would be here to guide, but please note that you would not make progress if you are only just waiting for classroom teachings. It doesn't work. Like, you will not find anywhere that's is being taught that way. So yeah, I guess for the people that went to the physical meetup, I was explaining to them that over the course of my career, I've been able to work for at least 3 to 4 international companies across 3 continents, right? And it's only possible because I got good at what I do. Like, I learned how to, not, I learned how to, sit, consume tutorials, build things, solve issues, and, just get good at what I do in general. And most of the time, right, I don't even like see the people that I work with face to face. Like, many people I've worked with, that's, I've never had the pleasure of meeting physically. So this is a digital world, though. For those people that are still saying, it's only by physical classes they can learn, snap out of it. I've repeated this thing, over and over now. So yeah, you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Feel free to send a message if you need my help for anything, or if you have any questions.
Hello, sir. We're not taking attendance.